Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Science Shorts with Mr. Perkins. I'm Mr. Perkins. I'm a biology teacher, currently running for state senate and trying to just do some short little snippets for everybody so that teachers, parents, kids who are at home can have a little break during the day and hopefully learn a little something as well. We're going back to talking more about diseases, viruses, and specifically today, we are focusing on something called zoonotic diseases. But first, we start like we always do with birthdays. I've been doing a lot of anniversaries rather than birthdays, birthdays of a specific invention or a discovery. But today we do have a pretty cool birthday. Samuel Morse, born on this day in 1791, famous for inventing Morse code. Not an inventor by nature, spent until he was in his 40s working as a painter, doing portraits for people, and then in his 40s decided to try his hand at engineering, invented a version of the telegraph and invented Morse code, the dit and dot language that we still use in various forms to this day. So happy birthday to Samuel Morse. Like I said, we're doing zoonotic diseases, which specifically are diseases that jump from animals to humans or humans to animals, diseases that don't just stick in one species. Now, this has been coming up a lot lately because COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. Our current evidence points to the idea that it originated in bats and jumped to people. So how do diseases do that? When we talk about there's a new disease, where do some of those diseases come from that have arisen in animals? So we're going to talk about that process a little bit today. The big thing is that the pathogen has to adapt in some way. There are plenty of diseases out there that are endemic to a certain species. Endemic here is a scientific word that means native only to one space. So we would say that penguins are endemic to the southern hemisphere. They only live in the southern hemisphere. We would say kangaroos are endemic to Australia. So if a disease is endemic to a species, it only occurs in that species. So we can look at things like Bordetella, or this is also known as kennel cough. Only in dogs. Humans cannot get Bordetella. Horses can't get Bordetella. Fish can't get Bordetella. It's endemic. Tobacco mosaic virus, as the name might suggest, it's endemic to tobacco plants. We sometimes forget that viruses can infect plants as well, but the tobacco mosaic virus, it's endemic to tobacco plants. And then we have other things that are endemic to groups. So coccidia is a rather nasty little. It's not a virus. It's a little parasite. And it can do a number on the intestines, can really hurt the animal a lot, but it's endemic to hoofed animals. So I've personally seen it in deer, but it can also infect things like cows, horses, things like that. But like a bird couldn't get coccidia. So even though it's not native to just one species, it's still endemic to that group. So when we've got a disease that is endemic to just one species, how does it jump? Well, first, a mutation has to occur. We talked about a couple weeks ago when a virus infects a cell, it uses that cell's machinery to make more copies of the virus. Well, our cell's machinery don't always work perfectly. They don't always work perfectly for us either. I mean, a cell's making errors when copying to other cells is how we can get a number of diseases, including cancer. But when our cells are making more viruses because the virus has hijacked it, well, errors can occur there too. So here we've got, all of our half of a DNA strand, and instead of a T being right here, instead of thymine, it gets copied, and oops, instead of a thymine there, it's cytosine. And there are, instead of a different one here, maybe this one could have gotten deleted, and then all of these shifted over one, or there could be an additional C stuck in here. There are a number of different ways that a mutation can occur, but the point is that a mutation happens. And now that virus, which was set to grab onto the proteins on the outside of a specific species cell, can now grab onto new proteins. This isn't intentional. This isn't the virus trying to do anything. This is just basic natural selection. Mutations occur, and if it helps the virus, that mutation is going to stay. By helps the virus, I mean allows the virus to make more viruses better. So if this mutation allows something that was once in a bat to now grab onto proteins in a human, now that virus could jump species. But there's a second very important thing. That virus, now that it's changed, it has to come in contact with humans. And so that's why when we talk about methods of zoonotic diseases originating, new zoonotic disease coming about, we think about places where animals and humans are really pushed up together, where this random virus in the air, that if it happened out in the wild, it would never have met a human, and therefore it just would have disappeared and nobody would have ever even known it happened. But if we look at institutions like packed together farmers markets that are selling meat, or packed together industrial farms, those are two of the big places that we see these sorts of diseases originate. So we can get airborne transfer, we can get close proximity to either anything the animal gives off, so animal saliva or animal feces, anything like that. Sometimes we can get that in the meat or the milk of a given animal, or if an animal bites us. That is also a way that the disease, now that used to live in one species and randomly got a mutation, can suddenly jump to humans. So both of these things need to happen. A mutation needs to occur that allows the virus to jump species, and then the opportunity for that virus to come into contact with a human happens as well. So, and then there's kind of a couple things that can happen since then. So now there can be a reserve in the wild population. And so that means, or a reservoir in the native population. So this would be things like malaria or West Nile virus. These are diseases that humans can't spread to each other. Like if you're sitting next to somebody on the bus with West Nile virus, nothing they can do is going to pass West Nile virus to you. You have to get it from a mosquito bite. So even if we were to cure every human in the world of West Nile virus, if there are still mosquitoes that have this disease as well, then it can still be passed along to humans. And sometimes the disease is able to perform its life cycle in us. Something like malaria, the disease is still that uses humans as an important part of reproduction. But there are other diseases that actually don't want to cross into humans, and that crossing into humans actually kills that disease as well. It can't spread in us anymore. If you've ever swam in a lake in Minnesota and ended up with something called swimmer's itch, I know I had it plenty as a kid. That's actually an instance of that. That swimmer's itch wants to infect ducks, but if it finds a human, it gets into the human and causes us to itch a whole bunch, but it actually dies. It can't reproduce in us. But there's still that reservoir in nature. So that reservoir in nature spills over, and you can get some transmission among humans. So this would be cowpox or rabies. These are things that can be passed human to human, but aren't passed very effectively. So, rabies. If somebody with rabies bites another human, that will transmit the disease, but that doesn't happen very much. That's mostly we get rabies from bites from other animals. So it does infect humans, and humans can spread it, but usually not very effectively. I'm not going to focus on rabies too much, but I am going to put a link in the description of this video to an amazing book called Rabid: The Cultural History of a Terrifying Virus. Rabies is fascinating because we have records of people getting rabies for thousands of years. There's pretty solid evidence that rabies is the origin of the werewolf myth. This is a disease that has had a huge impact on the culture of humans across the globe and is fascinating, but started in animals, jumped to humans. But I'm going to put this book in the description. It's called Rabid: The Cultural History of Rabies. It's awesome. I would check it out if you're into such things. Cowpox we're going to talk much more about next time when we talk about vaccines. And then The kind of last type of zoonotic disease, when the virus jumps to humans and you just need human-to-human transmission, you completely cut out the original animal source in its entirety. So bird flu, if you remember H1N1 a couple years ago, that was the case of this, and COVID-19. We no longer need, the virus doesn't need to go back to bats, and it can spread between humans just fine. So there is now sustained transmission and human outbreaks of COVID-19. So even among zoonotic diseases, there's a big range of things. And as you can tell, just because it's one of these things doesn't mean it's more or less deadly. Malaria is it kills millions of people, but it largely is, the reservoir is in animals. It doesn't spread between us. Rabies is certainly a very deadly virus. COVID-19 is a deadly virus. So these are different types of zoonotic diseases. And although this graph is presented kind of as a progression, don't think of this as more or less deadly in any way. It's just different types of life tracks that the virus can take. The last two zoonotic diseases that I want to highlight real quickly. If you were alive back in the 90s, you might remember in the mid-90s there was this ban on beef from Great Britain. It started about 1995, and many countries, the US, France, many countries stopped importing beef from Britain entirely because of infections of mad cow disease. Now, in 1995, only 3 people actually died of mad cow disease, but because the world was so concerned about mad cow disease, bovine encephalopathy is the real name, but mad cow is what everybody knows it by. Everybody was so concerned about mad cow jumping to humans that we banned beef exports from the UK for years because of just 3 people dying. And then closer here to home, if you're a deer hunter, you're well aware of chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease is something that we have never seen it in humans, but we have a lot of concern about it jumping to people. It's a disease that's present in deer, and our fear is that